Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 here to preview South Carolina's football schedule for the 2023 season. Boy, Blake, this is not going to be an easy one. One thing we talk about, some teams have scheduled themselves a path to 4 wins out of conference. Some teams have done something decidedly less than that. And that's one thing that stands out to me off the top of this. Carolina's non-conference schedule, it starts with North Carolina in a game played in Charlotte. It ends with Clemson in the annual rivalry game, which the Gamecocks won a year ago. In the middle, you've got Jacksonville State, which is the closest thing to maybe a layup on the schedule. Jacksonville State in its first year in FBS competition. And then, oh, by the way, your other non-conference game, I'm not going to say Carolina's going to lose this one because it's not, but you have easy FCS games and hard FCS games. Not only did Carolina get one of the harder ones, I think, with Furman, which went 10-3 a year ago, but also it's an in-state rival in that sense, which sometimes those teams bring a little something extra to play you. That's one thing that stands out to me about South Carolina's schedule is, boy, Shane Beamer could have made it a lot tougher much easier on himself in terms of what he scheduled there.
Yeah, I mean, look, you kind of expect the games against North Carolina and Clemson. I mean, we know what to expect from those two teams now at this point, and so those are two challenging games. And like you said, Furman won 10 games last year. Got the second round of the FCS playoffs, I believe. Jacksonville State won 9 games last year. Phil still has this as the second toughest schedule in the country behind Florida, which you and I have already talked about. The Florida schedule is another brutal one. So take that for what it's worth. I mean, it's hard to disagree with that, right? Because you add in those non-conference games, which, you get Clemson at home, the North Carolina ones in Charlotte, but you got to go to Georgia. You got to go to Tennessee. You've got to go to Texas A&M, who we think is going to be better. You probably got a top 25 Kentucky team coming in late November. Who knows with Florida and road trip to Missouri and Mississippi State? Like it's not an easy schedule here. And I would agree that it is probably among the toughest in college football.
Yeah, I mean, I guess about the only thing you can say is it could have gotten worse. It could have had Alabama or LSU on
My
there. Other
goodness,
than
could you
that,
imagine? Oh,
it's hard to pick many flaws with Carolina taking on all comers on this one. And again, of course, the league dictates that. And I say Shane Beamer scheduled. Some of these games are scheduled years in advance, but coaches have made a habit of having their ADs write big enough checks to get out of games, and that's not the way it's playing out for Carolina coming into the season. So hats off to the Gamecocks for making an entertaining schedule for us here. Going to enjoy seeing how it unfolds.
yeah.
Let's start with, okay, we've got the North Carolina game in Charlotte to begin, then the Furman game, then a road trip to Georgia in a game where last year Carolina was not competitive, got blown out 48-7, but Georgia changing quarterbacks under Carson Beck. Of course, Georgia lost like 219 guys to the NFL draft last year. So rebuild is not the word. Georgia's the national title favorite, but it's a different cast of guys. So maybe you don't want to catch Georgia at any point, but you could perhaps catch the Bulldogs at a worse time given that dynamic. Then here's where it gets interesting too. Mississippi State, a team that under Zach Arnett, Blake, is going to be changing some things, changing offenses. You're going to see a tight end for a change. You're going to see more running plays, allegedly. You're going to see Emmanuel Forbes gone, but some good defenders back on that team. That's going to be a very interesting one in Columbia. And I'll also be interested to see if the Gamecocks can maybe make it a little more interesting with Georgia than they did a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I look at this as a whole here. If we're just looking at this portion of the schedule and fitting it into the rest of the schedule, South Carolina won 8 games last year, right? And I think your first thought is, if you're going to move forward as a program, you feel like, all right, let's either get to that point or let's take another step forward. And so if you're trying to find those 8 or 9 wins on the schedule, I mean, this is one where it's like, man, think about how important
You
really all
need
4 of
3
these games.
here.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
think about the importance of these games. And look, it's not going to be. I know South Carolina fans, probably don't want to hear this, but I don't think anyone's going to be circling the Georgia game as a win right now. Not to say, we've seen strange things happen in the SEC, and we saw Georgia struggle early in the season last year. If you remember a couple of those games, right? It was at the Kent State game. Everybody's all of a sudden panicking about Georgia, but So I mean, take that for what it's worth, I suppose. But um, still, these are a very important slate of games because, like you said, if you can go 3-1 with a win over a top 25 North Carolina team, beat a what probably figures to be a solid to good Furman team, and Mississippi State's a team that I think just with the changes, it's hard for us to have high expectations just because based on the unknowns more than anything else. Yeah, I mean, going 3-1 here, knowing what you have the rest of the way with some of those other games, yeah, I think it's important. Again, if you want to, let's say, feel like you're not taking a step back and even a 6-6, 7-6, or whatever, right? Like I think you always want that positive momentum as a coach, especially. You don't want to give anyone sort of any doubt. And once you hit the mark that they hit last season with two just game changing wins in terms of the Shane Beamer era to beat Tennessee and Clemson at the end of the season, I think getting off to a great start by winning three of these first four in some fashion. Now, obviously, if you beat a Georgia as part of that three, then we're having another discussion. But it's very important, I think, for the schedule.
Yeah, then comes one I think is worth discussing as a standalone. At Tennessee on September the 30th. That was a game last year. That might have been the shocker of the college football season. Let me just set the stage for you. The 3 games prior, Carolina had lost 23-10 to Missouri in Columbia, had played Vanderbilt not played Vanderbilt too, had beaten Vanderbilt 38-27 in Nashville. I was at the game in that press box. We were watching that going, these are 2 teams that aren't very good. And boy, both those teams flip scripts pretty quickly. Carolina goes to Florida the next week and gets pounded 38-6. Tennessee was maybe the hottest team in the country, and the Vols could not get a stop against the Gamecocks, who won 63-38. And it was actually worse than that at times. So that rematch with Tennessee is going to be fascinating, not just for that dynamic of what happened last year. It's going to be that whole, is Joe Milton the guy that Tennessee thinks Joe Milton can be? Are they going to go to the freshman instead? Where is Tennessee stability-wise with its offense there? I just think that game is going to be one to circle. I think it'd be a little more entertaining if it's in Columbia, but they will be laying in wait for Carolina in that one in Knoxville, I would have to
No,
believe.
I don't care where the game's played out. I think it's going to be entertaining no matter what because I think the
Oh, I
entertainment
do
is
too.
the Tennessee fans and what you could see there. But yeah, I mean, it's revenge on the mind on September the 30th and November the 25th, I think for sure, with those Tennessee and Clemson games. Except the problem for Clemson is that they have to go to Williams-Brice Stadium. And unfortunately for South Carolina, they've got to go to Neyland Stadium. But the environment will be great, I think, just based off what happened last season. And I don't think Josh Heupel is going to let his team forget about that game a season ago and how it sort of derailed Tennessee's potential hope for a college football playoff spot. So.
Yeah, the next 3 as of June are kind of hard to size up. I think you've got Florida was 6-7 a year ago. Of course, just obliterated the Gamecocks last year. We are not particularly high on Florida this year. I would think in Columbia that would be one that Carolina would be favored in. The road trip to Missouri, that's a team that played a lot of teams close a year ago and, of course, gave Carolina fits a year ago. That will be very interesting given how Missouri season is or is not going at that point. And then Texas A&M, another wild card game. We just talked about the Aggies a few minutes ago, doing a schedule preview for those guys. And that's another team that played a tough schedule. It's got the coaching turmoil with Jimbo Fisher coming in. That's one of those that if it's going well, A&M is going to be fired up. That's a tough game. If it starts to go sideways and you get non-cohesion with your roster, whatever the word is I'm looking for there, you got a lot of variables in those 3 games for different reasons.
Yeah, you like to call it different tiers. I'm going to call it the prove it tier because I think all these three of
Yeah.
these teams got something to prove here with Florida, Missouri, and A&M. And so, yeah, I think that's exactly what it comes down to, and it makes those games very hard to predict. And not just 5 months out, 4 months out. Um, Even when the season starts, I think it's going to take us figuring out where those teams are at after 5 or 6 games before you really know exactly what to expect from that row of games for the Gamecocks.
Speaking of Gamecocks, you got another Gamecock coming up. Jacksonville
Oh boy.
State, the other Gamecocks in the FBS FBS now. Switching from the FCS, where Jacksonville State went 9-2 a year ago. Geography lesson for you guys. This is a little
boy.
bonus.
Here we
Jacksonville State is where, Blake?
go. Alabama.
Very good. Yeah, not in
Is that
Florida.
it?
Just going to let you guys know.
Is that
That's
it?
it. That's it.
That was the lesson? My goodness.
You
I
nailed
got
it.
an A+ on that one.
Anyway, the Gamecocks went 9-2 a year ago. I don't think I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure. Well, of course, they're not going to be in an FCS poll because they're FBS now, but they are expected to be one of the lower tier FBS teams this year. You look at the power poll we've got running across the bottom of the screen. That's where we've averaged 5 sources we like that rank the teams 1 to 133. Jacksonville State is ranked in the bottom 5 or 6 nationally according to those. Now, they could pull a James Madison, like James Madison pulled last year, and be a much tougher foe than people imagine. Of course, that was a team that beat Virginia Tech early. So don't know what to expect, but that was a team that went 9-2 a year ago. Vanderbilt, the Gamecocks have dominated the series in terms of the win-loss record. A lot of those games have been close, but I think 2008 was the last time that Vanderbilt beat South Carolina in what is an annual series. Then you've got a game with Kentucky. That one a year ago went in Carolina's favor, 24-14 in Lexington. This one, of course, will be played in Columbia. And then the game with Clemson. I'll be very interested to see where those two teams stand at their respective points of that season.
Yep. I mean, again, these are where you're trying to find wins, right? And that's, like I said, to feel like you're moving forward as a program. These are very important games because why? They're all at home, right? And I think that's what it really comes down to is just the way the schedule unfolds to get all of your November games at home. I can't imagine a better setup, just from that standpoint. And again, they all feel winnable, right? And I think that's what again, you talk about just the overall record and where South Carolina could be this season. All 4 of these games are ones that truly feel like that South Carolina can win just based on what they have coming into the season. And I think that's very encouraging, just given the tough portion early on in the schedule with those road trips to Tennessee and Georgia, and somewhat away from home, of course, against North Carolina, in Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte. But just getting these on the back end and being able to kind of build some of that motivation and sort of consistency, perhaps by this point in the season, I think will really help for South Carolina. So. I think you're muted.
We're going to be
go.
previewing every single SEC schedule for the coming year, or have previewed already. Best way to catch those, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps our analytics, and tell a friend. Anyway, lots of content coming. Baseball, football, basketball. We do it year-round here at Southeastern 14. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again soon with more SEC content.